Straight Shift with the Car Chick, the podcast that's all about cars, buying, selling, fixing, and driving, and sometimes pretty fast if you're the car chick. Now, here she is.
Welcome, everyone, to the Straight Shift. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most important pieces of safety equipment on your car, the tires. Okay, I know what you're going to say. What? Tires? Safety equipment? Tires aren't safety equipment. Safety equipment's things like airbags and brakes and seat belts, things like that. Yes, those are very important pieces of safety equipment, but I am here to argue today that tires are one of the most important pieces of safety equipment. So let me make my case to you. Let's talk about what tires actually do. They're not just rubber donuts that hold up your car while you're driving down the road. Tires are what stop your car. Now, I know you're probably thinking, no, brakes are what stop my car. True, brakes are what stop the wheels of your car from rotating. But it's the actual friction of the rubber tire against the road surface that causes your car to stop. Now, I promise I'm not going to get any more scientific and technical and get into the physics of coefficients of friction and all that stuff. But I want everyone to understand why this is so important. And think about the last time you were driving in the rain. When you hit your brakes, your vehicle doesn't stop as fast. Why? Because the road is wet, meaning that the friction between your tires and the road is reduced. Therefore, it takes longer for your vehicle to come to a stop, which translates to, oh gosh, I got to leave a lot more space between me and the car in front of me and take extra time. When I hit those brakes, I've got to leave myself extra time for the vehicle to stop. The tires themselves, how they're made, the compounds that are used, the tread pattern, how much tread depth you have, these are all factors that go into how good of a tire do you have. Now, when people shop for tires, and I understand shopping for tires can be very, very difficult because it's difficult to know what's a good tire and what's not. And you see prices all over the board. And what people tend to do is they shop for tires based on price. And I want to talk about why it's really dangerous to do that. If you're going to skimp on something, tires are probably not the best thing to skimp on because the cheaper tires are not anywhere near as safe. Now, I didn't really appreciate just how important tires are and really understand how the composition of the tires and what goes into it makes that big of a difference until I did some tire testing with Michelin over a few years. I've always known that tires were important. I evaluated them based on kind of how sticky they were, how much grip I could get based on being on the racetrack. And my experience with tires was really limited to growing up in Wisconsin and, what tires worked well in the snow for half the year up there, as well as, what tire gave me the most grip on the racetrack. I thought of them in terms of performance. Like I do most things with cars. But until I did the scientific testing with Michelin and really saw what goes into making a tire, and we did very concrete, quantifiable, measurable tests on tires to see what their safety and performance capabilities were, I didn't appreciate it. And unless you do something like that and go through that experience and really see it for yourself, it is hard to know. So I want to share my experiences doing that with you guys today and let you know what I learned and why it really brought tires into the forefront of my mind and changed the way I look at them in terms of a piece of safety equipment. I will give you probably the best example was we were down at Michelin's super top secret testing facility outside of Greenville, South Carolina, which is really easy to see on Google Earth. So I'm not sure how top secret it is, but it's a really cool facility. And we were testing their Pilot Sport All Season 3 tire as well as several others. And one of the things that they tend to do is the tire companies, they invite tire companies, retail shops, mechanics to come out and do these kind of, test and drive experiences, because that's a part of their marketing scheme, because they know that you as the end consumer probably don't know very much about tires, and you're going to go to your mechanic or your local tire store and say, hey, I need new tires. And you're probably going to rely on their recommendation. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as the people at your tire store really know what they're doing and they have been to these events and they have studied the tires. They're not just recommending whatever they're getting a special kickback from the manufacturer on, because let me tell you, that happens too. So when you do go to your tire store to get tires and ask for their opinion, ask them what they're basing their opinion on and get them to give you a little more technical information. You'll find out, have they really gone through these tests with the tires themselves and seen it for themselves, or are they just kind of making some stuff up? That can happen. So what we did was, when we were down there doing this testing with Michelin, one of the things that Michelin noted was that a lot of the tire, most of these guys are guys, right? So they come and do these tests, and Michelin tends to use 3 Series BMWs as their testing vehicles. And, they're great vehicles. But what they were hearing from the tire sellers was that, oh, wow, this is such a great car. The car handles so beautifully. They were giving the BMW all of the credit for its handling and not the car. Not the tires. So what we did to kind of prove the point was, we put a set of probably the worst, cheapest, crappiest Chinese rubber donuts. I swear these were like $20 a tire onto the BMW. And we took that around the racetrack. And let me tell you, at no time did I have any control whatsoever over that car. I might as well have been driving on ice. Those stupid rubber donuts just slipped and slid and did not grip. And it was really fun, mind you, from my perspective, but the tires were so bad that I might as well have been driving on like little plastic Tonka toy tires and not something rubber. And then we tested against a Michelin tire. And we tested that on a Toyota Sienna minivan, affectionately known as the Swagger Wagon. And we took the minivan around the racetrack. And because it had good tires on it, lap times were 6 seconds faster than in the BMW. That is the difference a tire can make. And that was testing from a performance standpoint. The other thing that we did was we tested the tire's stopping power on both wet and dry conditions. So what we did was we were using, at the time, Infiniti G37 sedans, which is, a good, powerful car, a decent sized sedan, reasonably heavy, not an SUV, but still a good sized vehicle. And we would floor it straight line, get it up to 60 miles an hour. And then as soon as we crossed a certain line on the track, we would slam on the brakes, just like, if something jumped out in front of you and you had to hit your brakes in an emergency situation. And lasers measured the distance from when, we hit the brake pedal to when the car actually came to a complete stop. And we tested that with a variety of different tires. And with, the good tires like the Michelins, and I'm throwing that name out there because I've done a lot of testing with them. I do happen to think they're the best tire on the market. They are a little more expensive and they are not paying me in any way for this podcast. There are lots of other good tires out there too. I've done this with Goodyear. We've done this with, several different tire companies, Hankook. There's lots of good tires out there. But the difference between, a good tire on your car and when it stops versus when you're on a cheaper kind of no-name discount type of tire, most of which are made somewhere in Asia, the stopping distance, they were doubled on the crappy tires. And this is on perfectly dry conditions, and these were brand new tires. So, if the good tire stopped in 12 feet and the crappy tire stopped in over 22 feet, holy cow, that's a huge difference on the road. That is the difference between your car stopping in time to prevent you from rear-ending someone or you becoming a part of the back seat of the car in front of you. This is why you just don't mess around with tires, and you need to invest in as good a quality tire as you can for the money. Those tests were in dry conditions. We did the same thing in wet conditions. They started pouring, tons of water onto the track, and we repeated the test. And in the good tires, we compared our times with, the good tire on the dry and the good tire on the wet. And yes, your stopping distances are going to double, sometimes triple when it is wet. The tread on the tire is what channels water away from the tire. So it basically takes away that layer of water that is creating that barrier between your tire and the road and preventing friction from happening, therefore preventing you from stopping your tire. If you've ever been driving in really, really heavy rain conditions and you've started to hydroplane, what that is your tire is now touching water only and not the road. Your car has become a boat and you are skimming across the water. And that's very, very scary if it's ever happened to you. When that happens, the tread of your tires it's exceeded their ability to channel all that water away. So obviously that means that the tread depth on your tires and the type of tread and how good that tread is at moving water away from the wheel of your car, that's huge. It makes a big, big difference. And you wouldn't think, how are there that many different types of treads? Believe me, there are a bazillion different types of tread patterns, and manufacturers spend a ton of money researching and testing which tread patterns work the best and how do they work when they're brand new and you've got a lot of tread because the tire's, nice and thick because it's brand new, versus when the tire's halfway worn or you've only got, say, 20% of the tread depth remaining because the tire's really worn out. What are the differences with that? We've tested between a brand new tire and a tire that's worn 50% of the time versus a tire that's, basically at the wear bars and desperately needs replacing. And the difference in the stopping power across those is astronomical. When your tire is just 50% worn, you look at it and you're like, I still got plenty of tread left. That's true. But you have lost as much as 80 to 90% of your stopping power, especially in the rain. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go out and replace your tires at, when they're 50% worn, obviously not. But it does mean that you need to recognize that your stopping distances are going to be greater and you need to leave yourself more time to stop, both in the dry and especially in the wet. When we come back, I'm going to take a really super quick break, and then I'm going to talk to you about how do you choose tires? What are the different things that you need to look at, as well as how do you find out the age of your tire? I will be right back after this. Do you hate car shopping? Do you worry about being taken advantage of, or about finding the right car at a fair price? Buying a car can be a frustrating and time-consuming experience. But what if you could get a great deal without having to do a ton of research, without having to haggle, and without the fear of buying a lemon? You can. As your personal car shopper, the Car Chick will help you pick the perfect car based on your unique lifestyle, budget, and personality. She'll handle all of the legwork and negotiating for you. All you have to do is sign the papers and take the keys. It's that easy. To learn how the Car Chick can save you time, money, and hassle on your next car purchase, give us a call at 888-575-2138. That's 888-575-2138. Or visit us on the web at thecarchick.com.
The Car Chick is back for more Straight Shift.
Welcome back to The Straight Shift. We are talking about tires today and why they're such an important piece of safety equipment on your car. Before the break, I shared with you some of my experiences in testing tires under relatively scientific conditions and why cheap, crappy tires not only don't perform well, but are not as safe because they don't give you the same kind of stopping power that a good quality tire does. And that stopping distance can vary, whether it's dry, it's wet, how much tread depth you have remaining, and just the quality of the tire to begin with. So we don't want to shop for tires exclusively based on price. I know everyone is on a budget. Not everyone can afford to buy, the top level tires. So when you do go tire shopping, you need to try and find the best performance for your budget. There are so many different letters and numbers and ratings associated with tires that this is where it can become very confusing for folks. So I want to talk about what some of those things are and what they really mean to you and, to what it's going to do for you in the tire and your wallet. The first one is the speed rating. The speed rating of the tire is a letter in our alphabet. It might be an H-rated tire, it might be an S-rated tire, or a Z-rated tire. What that means is the speed rating refers to how well the tire dissipates heat. This goes back to the friction we were talking about. When your tire is in contact, rolling down the road, there's friction. That's what makes the tire stick to the road. What makes your vehicle stop when you hit the brakes. A certain amount of heat buildup in the tires is a good thing because as rubber heats up, it gets a little bit softer, which makes it a little bit grippier and you get better traction. But to a certain extent, once you get too much heat, then the tire starts to get greasy and gooey and you actually lose traction because it's greasy. That means that the tire has not dissipated the heat enough. So the closer that letter is to the end of our alphabet, the lower the speed rating. So for example, an H-rated tire will dissipate heat up to 130 miles an hour. Well, what does that really mean? It means that an H-rated tire is going to handle the heat better. It's great for people that do a lot of driving at highway speeds. And it means that the tire is going to be able to handle that heat over and over again without wearing out so fast. So for example, an S-rated tire that has a lower heat rating, it doesn't dissipate heat quite as well. It's still fine for, driving on the highway. It might give you a little more performance and grippiness on the street, but it's also going to wear out faster. If you drive a sports car or have ever driven a sports car, you might have Z-rated tires. That's what you're going to find on a Corvette or a Porsche. Those tires are really, really grippy. They warm up fast. They stick to the road, but you also wear them out a heck of a lot faster. So that's something to balance. What type of driving are you going to be doing and how much do you want to spend on a tire for how long it's going to last? The next rating that you need to consider is also a letter or a couple of letters, and that's the load rating. When you're looking on the side of the tire and all those crazy letters and numbers that are confusing, the load rating is right before the H or the S or the Z, the speed rating on the tire. It refers to the load capacity, the carrying capacity of that single tire. So the heavier the car, like for example, if you drive a big pickup truck or a big honking SUV like a Suburban, you're going to need a tire that can handle that weight, especially if you're going to start loading it up with stuff, rocks, dirt, kids and all their crap, everything. The sidewall of the tires is the softest part of the tire. So if you take a tire that's maybe laying around in the garage and you press on it, you will see that sidewall flexes. And if the sidewall flexes too much, it can blow out. It can only handle so much pressure. So a tire that has a higher load rating, like an LT tire, which stands for light truck, that's going to have a stiffer sidewall. The tire is going to be stronger so that when the weight of the vehicle and all the stuff you're putting in the vehicle presses down on those tires, that sidewall is not going to flex as much. The tire is going to be strong enough to hold up the heavy vehicle without blowing out. So if you do have a heavy vehicle, you plan to load it down with even more heavy stuff, make sure that you are not skimping on that load rating. Another grade is the treadwear grade. That's usually a 3-digit number. And this is how sticky the tires are. This is another rating that lends itself to how long the tire is going to last, trading off with how well it's going to perform, how sticky or grippy is it going to be in the corners and on the road. This is a DOT number. Like for example, 140 is the lowest DOT approved traction or treadwear rating for street tires. So if it's lower than that, if it's like 100 or 90, you're not allowed to drive that on the street. That's a racing tire. It's a racing slick. It goes on the it goes on the racetrack. It does not go on our city streets. Now, most passenger tires that you're going to find are going to be maybe somewhere in the 300 range. You might even find one that's a 400 range. That tire's not going to stick real well, but it's probably going to last you a really long time. So if you're just tooling around town doing just normal driving and you don't have a performance car and you don't take the corners like a complete maniac like I do, then you don't need that higher level of performance, that higher stickiness. Go for the higher tread wear so it will last you longer and you'll get more of your money's worth. As I said before, as a tire wears, you lose traction, especially in the wet. So if you are going out and buying new tires, you're trying to time when to buy new tires. Obviously, if you're down to the wear bars, it's time to get new tires, and it doesn't matter what time of year it is. But if you have an option, to buy tires, in September, or it's going to last you a little bit longer getting into November, especially if you live in an area that gets more precipitation in the winter, but not so much that you have to actually switch over to full-blown snow tires, buy the tires in the fall, because that way you have brand new tires going into the wetter winter months. If you live someplace where spring is the rainiest time, where your area gets the most precipitation, then get new tires if you can at that time, because you always want to have the most possible tread depth during the rainiest times of the year, because it will give you the most traction. Another fancy code on the side of the tire that I want to talk about refers to the age of the tires. And this is something that a lot of times people don't realize. They don't think about when they get new tires to check how old that tire is. Now, it's not that I'm saying that tires are like milk and they spoil after 8 weeks. If a tire is a year old, that may not be a big deal at all. But if it's 5 or 6 years old, that's going to be a much bigger deal. Here's why. Here's what happens to tires as they age. Tires are subject to a process called oxidation. That means that oxygen interacts with the compounds in the rubber, causing them to harden and eventually become brittle. If you've ever seen, if you've had rubber products in your house, we notice this with our scuba gear from scuba diving. Over time, that rubber in our snorkels and masks gets more brittle and it breaks down. This happens to tires as well. No rubber is immune to oxidation. And if higher temperatures are involved, for example, if a tire has been sitting in a warehouse for several years, which can happen, and that warehouse is not climate controlled, and that warehouse is in Arizona, then those tires have been sitting in a sweltering warehouse for years. That rubber is going to age faster, and that tire is going to wear out. So be sure that when you're replacing your tires, that they are not, really, really old. The life cycle of any given rubber is around 7 years. If you don't drive your car a lot, like my mom or my in-laws, they have a secondary vehicle that they only put a few thousand miles a year on, their tires are going to wear out. They're going to get brittle, and you'll see the result of that in cracking around the tread, cracking around the sidewall. It's called dry rot. You'll start to see that, and that means that the rubber's breaking down. Your tire no longer has the structural integrity that it used to. It's more likely to blow out. So if you don't drive a lot of miles and you don't drive very spiritedly, you don't wear the tread down. So your tires may actually age and become brittle and dry rotted before you ever run out of tread. That's why when you get your car inspected, most state inspections, the mechanics are looking not only at what your tread depth is, but is there signs of dry rot on the tire? And you might get premature dry rot on a tire if that tire was stored in a hot facility before you purchased it. Tire companies manufacture tons of tires, and while a lot of them are really good at keeping their inventory fresh, especially if you're buying an off-brand or you're buying at a real discount store, a lot of times those super discounted places will buy leftover tires, the old inventory that didn't sell, and those tires could be older. So be sure your mechanic checks the age of the tire. And here's where you do that. There is another DOT number on the sidewall of your tire. It will say DOT, and then there's a bunch of numbers and letters after that, and there's 8 of them in a little kind of rounded rectangle. And then after that, there's another 4 numbers inside a slightly larger rounded rectangle. Those 4 numbers are a code for the age of your car. The first 2 numbers are the week of the year that tire was manufactured. So say it's 16. That means that the tire was manufactured probably around the end of April. The second 2 numbers are the year. So if your tire says 1617, that means that your tire was manufactured in the 16th week of the year 2017. So that tire right now would be about a year old. That's not necessarily a big deal at all. You don't have to have uber fresh tires, but if you see that the tire, is more than 4 years old, then you need to be like, oh, I'm not so sure about that, because it could dry rot on you early. Or if you don't drive a lot, then you will start to see dry rot on it long before you wear it out tread-wise. So you need to check that, or have your mechanic check that when they order tires. It is not unusual to see a tire that has been stored in a warehouse for a long period of time, especially if you are shopping by price. Finally, a couple other notes on tires before we wrap up. How many tires do you need to buy? Let's say you have been driving around, and if you're driving around any place like Charlotte that has so much construction, your chances of running over a nail are pretty darn good. Definitely way higher than winning the lottery. So can that tire be repaired, or do you have to replace it? And the answer to that is it depends. Depends how bad the hole is. Maybe the nail just kind of went into the tread blocks, nice straight on, and it's not too big and it didn't go in at weird angles. Then your mechanic may be able to remove that nail and patch and repair that tire. Plugs usually don't work, but they have good patch kits that do a stronger repair on the tire. But not every tire is going to be able to be repaired. If there's too much dry rot on the tire, if it's too old, the rubber will not have the integrity to handle a repair. If your tread is too thin, your tires are nearly worn out anyway, it's not going to be able to be repaired. If where the nail went in is too close to the sidewall, which I said is the weakest part of your tire, it's going to be too dangerous. They're not going to be able to repair it. Some shops may even say that they don't do repairs on tires at all because the risk is too high and they don't want the liability and they don't want to put you at risk. So you have to understand that not every place is going to be able to repair a tire, and the mechanic should be able to explain to you why it cannot be repaired. So let's go on the assumption that your tire cannot be repaired and you have to replace it. A lot of people just want to replace one tire, obviously because they're expensive. If the tire's practically brand new and you didn't have any kind of warranty on it, then yeah, you may be able to get away with just buying one new tire. It needs to match the other tires. You don't want to have different tires with different tread patterns on your car if you can avoid it, because that means the car is going to handle differently. We talked earlier about the importance of the tread, both pattern and wear levels, in terms of how that car channels water, how it sticks to the road, and how it performs. So if you have tires that have very, very different treads, under emergency conditions or under more spirited handling, the car is not necessarily going to handle the same way. Think about it in terms of tires being shoes. Let's pretend that the tires on your car are like shoes. So if you are walking around with 2 different types of shoes, maybe you have, one running shoe on and one just little comfortable flat shoe or a bedroom slipper. Obviously, if you try to run around the neighborhood, it's not going to work because one foot is going to grip better and be able to corner better and stop better than the other foot because you're wearing two different shoes. The car is the same way. It really does make a huge difference. If you say walked around all day with one high heel shoe and one flat shoe, your chiropractor is going to kill you because with having your legs at two different levels, that's putting a lot of strain on your spine. The same thing happens with your car. If you have different tread depths on your tires, on the same axle of the car, this is especially true if you have a vehicle that has an all-wheel drive system. That system is very specifically designed. They're very high tech. The computers do a lot of math for you to be able to give you traction on all four wheels. And when your tires are different, or if they have different tread depths, it can damage the suspension of your car because the all-wheel drive systems can't handle it right. It's just like wearing two different types of shoes will eventually tear up your spine. Just ask any chiropractor. This is why if you own an all-wheel drive vehicle and you have to replace one tire, you need to replace all four tires because they always have to match. It's another good reason to keep them rotated really well so that they're wearing evenly. If your car is two-wheel drive, then you can get away with just replacing the two tires on that axle. So let's say you run over a nail and the tire can't be repaired. Let's say it's the left front tire. You need to replace both of the tires on the front axle. And I'm going to throw one more thing in just for confusion. Then have the mechanic rotate those two brand new tires to the rear axle. And here is why. And we have tested this as well. The tire with the least amount of tread is going to have the least amount of traction, right? We've talked about this a couple times now. If that is the back end of your car, if the back end of your car loses traction, it's going to start swinging around on you back there. But by the time you feel that slippiness, you may not be able to do anything about it. It dramatically increases your chances of spinning out. If the tires with the least amount of grip are on your front axle, that's really closely connected to your steering wheel. And if the front of the car starts to slide, you're going to feel it almost instantly. And you have a much better chance of being able to correct and keep the car from spinning out. So always have the tires with the most tread on the back end, the back axle of your vehicle for safety. I know I have thrown a lot of information at you guys, in the last half an hour or so on tires, but tires are so critically important. So please don't buy tires purely based on price. Go to a good tire store, a good mechanic, and first of all, find the right tire that is recommended for your vehicle by the manufacturer. Get a recommendation from a good tire expert who has gone out there and done the type of testing that I have done with the tire companies that really understands how important the tires are. And they'll help you find a tire that gives you the best performance and safety for the amount of money that you can comfortably spend. But please don't skimp. Don't drive around on bald tires. Replace your tires when you need to. They are so critically important for your safety and the safety of those around you. Until next time, folks, I'm out of here. Drive safely.
The Straight Shift Podcast is copyright LeeAnn Shattuck, the Car Chick, 2017. All views expressed by guest and or co-hosts are those of the guest and or co-hosts, and not necessarily those of LeeAnn Shattuck or the Car Chick.